Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. And today, I am doing a Canadian whiskey. And what's interesting about Canadian whiskeys is, a few weeks ago I was going, I never do Canadian whiskeys. And now all of a sudden it seems like I'm doing a bunch of Canadian whiskeys. Well, this one is called Bearface. Cool bottle. It's going to run around $35 to $40, depending on where you're at. This is a 7-year whiskey. It is a corn whiskey. Okay, 7-year corn whiskey, and that 7 years is spent in 3 different casks. So it's in an American ex-bourbon barrel and spends most of its life in that. Then they move it to a red wine cask that's French oak, and then they end up actually putting it in Hungarian oak. And at some point during this process, they have those, when you go see the big cargo ships and you see those big metal containers, well, they have one of those that's out on the edge of the Canadian wilderness, and they have the barrels aging in there, really getting extreme temperatures. So, and knowing Canada, cold, it's on the edge of the wilderness, it's getting some pretty cold temperatures. So what does that do to a whiskey? Well, and that's what they refer to as elementally aged. That's a good question. And so we're going to jump in and do a little tasting on this and see how it is. This is 42.5% ABV. And color on it is, you can tell it's been in ex-bourbon casks rather than in a fresh virgin oak bourbon cask for a period of time because of the lighter color of it. On the nose, I get first kind of the oak wood spice notes coming through. Caramel is there, definitely. There's a sweet note, and of course, being a Canadian whiskey, you want to say it's a maple kind of a smell, but I don't know if I put my, what's interesting is it feels like it's somewhere between a blend of what you might consider a sugary, mapley note with a twinge of a bit of maybe a wine note. But there's also a little bit of a sawdust note that comes in through there. I'm starting to get creme brulee really on this. That's what's really standing out now. But it's not overly sweet. It's mild, and it's definitely got a nose to it. It's not weak. It's just a nose that you probably need to sit there and kind of work through it a little bit. Cheers. My favorite part of this whiskey is the mouthfeel. It has a really nice mouthfeel to it. And caramel is the main note when it first hits the palate. And then it goes into a pepper spice, and you get some tannins from that French oak that come in towards the end. So there's a bitter note. It's not aggressive, but it's definitely there. And then you're left with the creme brulee on the palate. But on the top of my palate, I'm still getting a little bit of that tannin note coming through. And maybe and I get this with a lot of corn whiskeys, it is kind of that buttery popcorn note coming in at the end. And it's mixing in there with that creme brulee. So there's a sweetness to this, but what's interesting is this is probably one of the driest Canadian whiskeys I think I've tasted. And so when you put it up against those really sweet mapley type whiskeys, I don't know if it's the time spent out there in the wilderness in those shipping containers, but it is really interesting how this has dried out. Or maybe it's just more time in the Hungarian oak and the French wine casks. Hard to say. It's an interesting whiskey. It's a great price point for mouthfeel as a just daily drinker kind of whiskey. I think this would be a very pleasant drinker, especially if you like the notes that I brought forth. Corn whiskeys usually are not that complex. This one has a decent amount of things going on in it. I don't know. It's something that, nice presentation. Hey, you know what? It's something that could be a bit of a mind changer for you on what Canadian whiskey is supposed to be. A lot of Canadian whiskeys are blends of different types of grain. Very interesting that they decided to go 100% corn on this. I hope you enjoyed the tasting today. If you have tasted Bearface, give me your comments below. What do you think about this in the world of Canadian whiskeys? And if you'd like to watch more of these episodes coming up, make sure to subscribe. Until next time, cheers and Slainte. It is a good whiskey. That creme brulee, boy, if you're in for that, it's very nice. Interesting, a little mint came in on at that time. More on the sides of the palate, spearmint. It is a spearmint, which I don't think I've ever gotten a spearmint like that before on the sides of the palate. Really, really interesting.